Everyone. It's an exciting week. I know our shrine looks very different because, Tuesday, they're going to start building all the cabinetry behind us. The cabinetry's all been built and it will be brought in and assembled this week. And then Friday, the lamas come and we'll be installing the whole shrine with all the large statues from downstairs over the next week after that or so. And so in a couple weeks, this room will look much, much different. And it's very exciting. It's kind of the culmination of the building project that started so long ago. I was thinking about it, the fire was 9 years ago, and we're getting a shrine now, so it's taken a while, but we're so excited, so very excited. So thank you all for coming today. My name's Marcus Casey. I'm one of the senior meditation instructors here. Make yourselves comfortable and relax and open yourselves to the words of the teachers and this amazing text that we're going to start a little study on. So this is one of my favorite texts. It's called The 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva. It's very short, but it contains so much Dharma, and there's so much that we can unpack from it. I know Lama Kathy did a talk, weekend talk, I want to say maybe 14 years ago, on the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. And following that, there was a group that committed to a certain number of recitations of it. And so, and even the copy I have here of the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva even has a bunch of bubbles in the back where you can keep track of your recitations. So this is a really important text that is a very useful text to kind of have close at mind at any time, because there's so much that's applicable to our daily lives. Before we go any further, it's our tradition to say the 4-line refuge prayer, and you all have that on your laminated sheet. And we will, let's say it together in English twice, and then in Tibetan the third time. And if you're not familiar with the prayer, just listen and make the aspiration that you will awaken and be able to help others to awaken. When we chant this, we are chanting our commitment to taking refuge in the 3 jewels, the Buddha, or what we aspire to, the Dharma, or the path, and the Sangha, our companions along the path. So let's go ahead and say it twice in English and then once in Tibetan. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Sangye chidang tsoki chonam la, jang chu bardu dai ni kyap su chi, dagi jin so gi pe su nam gi, drola penchir sangje duparsho. Thank you very much. All right, so the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. In 37 verses, we are given a roadmap for what it means to be a bodhisattva. So what is a bodhisattva? A bodhisattva is one who is on the path to complete enlightenment, but has vowed to help all others first. A bodhisattva practices bodhichitta. So let's unpack that. Bodhichitta, literally, the translation of the word literally means enlightened mind. And there are two characteristics of enlightened mind: compassion and wisdom. So a bodhisattva is one who practices and develops wisdom and compassion. And those are very specific terms in Buddhism. But their main motivation, the reason we practice developing this type of compassion and this wisdom, is to relieve the suffering of others. A bodhisattva knows that ego clinging is the obstacle that stands in the way of being of great benefit to others. And there are many practices that help us to loosen the grip of ego clinging. Some of these practices nurture our compassion, and others help us grow in wisdom. And these work together. They are often referred to as the two wings of a bird, and you need both wings to fly. The more our compassion develops, the looser our grip becomes on our selfishness. But many of our ego-clinging habits are from our erroneous assumptions that we make about our world, namely that it is real, permanent, and unchanging. Developing our wisdom helps us cut the root of our clinging. Those who have taken refuge in a refuge ceremony, which is kind of the entry ceremony to becoming a Buddhist, to calling yourself a Buddhist, then you can also take the Bodhisattva vow after that. And in the Bodhisattva vow, you vow that from this point forward, you dedicate your life to practicing bodhicitta to benefit others. And Lama Kathy likes to refer to those who make this vow as being bodhisattvas in training. So if you've taken the vow, or even if you haven't, you're wanting to train in developing your compassion and wisdom, it's kind of helpful to have a guide, right? A textbook, right? So this is one of our main, most important textbooks that we can use to know how to practice to be a bodhisattva, to know what we're aspiring to and the level of commitment that we can make to helping others be free from suffering and to awaken. I had a college professor who used to quote the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, and I say this every once in a while because it always stuck in my head. Soren Kierkegaard said that purity of heart is to will one thing. And for a bodhisattva in training, our one thing is to develop bodhicitta. We work to put aside all other concerns and to focus on developing compassion and wisdom, developing the enlightened mind for the benefit of ourselves and all others. All right, this is the fun part. I've got stories now. I love stories. Before we dive into the text itself, let's talk about the author. Nolchu Togme Zangpo, and we'll just call him Togme Zangpo from now on. I won't go into all of his life details, but there are some great stories of how committed he was to loving kindness and compassion. And I think they're great to learn so that we know that this text is coming from someone who lived this profound compassion. He did not have a trouble-free childhood. He faced many difficulties. His mother died when he was 3. His grandmother took care of him for a while, but then she died that same year. And so he went to live with an uncle who cared for him, and then he entered the monastery and became a monk at age 14. And so the first fun story comes from when he's a child. On a particularly cold day, his caretakers dressed him warmly and sent him out to play. And not long after, they discovered that he had taken off all his clothes and was outdoor naked. And they questioned him and they said, "Why don't you have your clothes on? It's freezing cold out." And they learned that he had come upon a hill of ants. And he looked at the ants and figured that they must be freezing. And wanting to keep them warm, he took off all of his clothes and covered the anthill with his clothes in order to keep them warm. So even as a child, he expressed profound loving kindness and compassion. Now, the next story is from one of the sources for the teaching that I used from His Holiness Karmapa, Traveling the Path of Compassion, that teaches about the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. And he says that when Togme Zangpo was about 30 years old, a beggar who was infested with lice appeared at the gate of his monastery. And Togme Zangpo understood that if people knew that such a person were staying near the gate, they would probably drive him away and tell him to leave. So Togme Zangpo secretly brought food and supplies to the beggar under cover of darkness. This went on for a few days. But then one night, Togme Zangpo couldn't find the man. So he searched all over for him and eventually discovered him hiding in a corner. And he said, "Why are you doing this? Why didn't I see you before?" And the man replied, "I'm hiding because anyone who sees me is so repulsed by my appearance, they feel nauseous. So I try to stay out of the way." The man looked so miserable that Togme Zangpo took him to his own room and let him stay there. He brought him more food and gave him one of his own robes, a nice woolen garment, to replace the rags infested by lice. Then it occurred to Togme Zangpo that if these old clothes were thrown away, all the lice would die, since they live off of blood. To keep that from happening, he took the beggar's clothes and put them on himself. From wearing this infested clothing, he himself became sick, so sick that he couldn't give teachings anymore. His students came to him to find out what was happening, and when they saw what was going on, they all protested. Some said, "To be a Dharma practitioner, you don't need to get involved in other people's sufferings and troubles. You can practice Dharma and also lead a comfortable life." Other people said, "You are wasting your time. It is not good to ruin your precious life for something as insignificant as lice." Other students simply requested, "For the sake of your students, please don't do this. Please get rid of the lice and put on some fresh clothes." Togme Zangpo smiled and answered them, "So far, I have had many lives, and all of them went to waste because I focused on myself. This time, I am using my body and my life to help others. Now I have a purpose and feel useful. Even if I die now, I will know that I used my years in a meaningful way. So I'm not going to change what I'm doing. I will not give this up." He nurtured the lice for 17 days until all of them were gone. Then he said prayers and mantras for them. Later, when Togme Zangpo was on his deathbed, friends and students came to see him knowing that these were his last days. One of his students asked, "After you die, in which pure land will you take birth?" And Togme Zangpo said, "There are some Kadampa masters who pray to be reborn in the hell realm. And I too would be happy to be born there if it would be useful to living beings. If my rebirth were not beneficial to others, it would not be good for me, even if I were reborn in a pure land. I have no desire for such a rebirth. Anyway, I don't have the power to be reborn wherever I wish. I just pray that I will be reborn in a place where I will be able to help sentient beings. That's the courage of compassion, willing to be born in hell if it will help other beings. So I hope these stories get you a good picture of the author of our text. And it's a really good introduction to the teachings that we are about to experience. All right, so now let's start with the text itself. And I figure every time we actually read through the text, let's all do it together. I hope everyone has a handout and can share with someone. So let's just read the very first stanza, starting with the dedication, the Namo Lokeshvaraya, and then that first stanza. Namo Lokeshvaraya, you see that all phenomena neither come nor go, still you strive solely for the benefit of beings. Supreme Guru and Protector Chenrezig, to you I continually bow with my body, speech, and mind. Namo Lokeshvaraya. Namo means I pay homage. And the whole thing means I pay homage to you, the Lord of the universe. And he's referring to Avalokiteshvara, or Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And he says, you see that all phenomena neither come nor go, still you strive solely for the benefit of beings. Chenrezig is a fully realized bodhisattva, and he has perfect wisdom. And in that perfect wisdom, he sees the true nature of phenomena. And the true nature of phenomena is beyond such concepts as coming and going, eternalism and nihilism, existence and non-existence, or oneness and diversity. And we won't go into the details of all this now. That is for another talk. And we'll get into some of these concepts as we go through later verses. But for now, we'll talk about it a little bit. For now, it's important to understand the types of mistakes we make about our true nature and the true nature of phenomena around us that form the root of our grasping after that which is not real and lasting. And we do this because we're trying to attain happiness, right? It's just a mistaken attempt at happiness. We live in this world, we think we're going to get happiness if we can arrange our circumstances just right in this world. And that's just not how it happens. We have some of the most powerful people in our world have arranged circumstances that are beyond our comprehension and are still deeply, deeply unhappy people. So we know that arranging circumstances is not going to bring us happiness. We also think that arranging our world around ourselves, around what we need, and removing anything that we are averse to, we feel like that will bring us suffering. But the moment we do get something that pleases us, it starts to change. And as we push things away, we push them away because we aren't happy with what is, with the present moment. We aren't willing to be content in the moment. We're constantly trying to change things. And there is a whole lot of suffering that arises as a result of that. So there were centuries after the Buddha taught, where there was a big intellectual exploration into the true nature of phenomena based on the Buddha's teachings. And one of the most important teachers on the way things really are was an Indian scholar by the name of Nagarjuna. And in the very beginning of his most famous text, he says, whatever arises in dependence, in space, dependence, dependent on other things, whatever arises in dependence has no cessation and no arising, no extinction and no permanence, no coming or going, and is neither different nor the same. Mental constructs completely stilled, it is taught to be peace. I bow down to the genuine words of the perfect Buddhas. So right there, he's saying that if any phenomena comes about dependent on other circumstances, right? I mean, what are we dependent on? We're dependent on water molecules. We're dependent on our parents. We're dependent on food on a daily basis and water on a daily basis. There's just so many dependencies that we have to even exist. So all the phenomena around us is like that as well. He says that those don't have any true coming or going. They're always changing. There's never a moment that you can say, this is this. Because the moment you say that, it has changed. It has no inherent self or inherent existence that is beyond the constant flux and change. So that very first line talks about there's no coming and going. And Togme Zangpo then, in our first stanza here, that's what he talks about. Chinrezig knows that phenomena neither come nor go. And he's saying Chinrezig has fully realized this perfect wisdom. He realizes this. He sees the way things really are. And in some ways, that's kind of a shortcut for us, for other people who have studied this to know, oh, he's talking about this teaching over here. He's using that first line from this teaching as a reference for saying that the perfect Buddhas have fully realized this perfect wisdom. Now, Chinrezig, I mentioned that he's a fully realized bodhisattva. But instead of resting in that realization, he, out of great compassion, works solely for the benefit of beings, to show us the path out of our suffering. And Chinrezig made such powerful aspirations to stick around and help us out of our suffering. That's why we consider him the Bodhisattva of compassion. His Holiness Karmapa says that enlightened persons who see all of this clearly, referring to the omniscient wisdom of Chinrezig, enlightened persons become so filled with compassion that their sole desire is to help others. They have no other purpose or activity except to work for the benefit of those caught in samsara, who still do not understand phenomena as they truly are. I think I read one time the metaphor of there being someone in a dark room who couldn't see, and they happen to, they're feeling around, and they touch a rope, and they think it's a snake. And they get, totally scared. They totally freak out because they thought they just touched a snake. They're in a dark room with a snake. But an enlightened being, Chinrezig, is like the person who knows it was just a rope. And because of that, they have even more compassion for the person who's freaking out, because they know that if they understood the way things really were, there would be no reason to fear. So Togme Zangpo goes on to say that a great spiritual teacher is inseparable from Chenrezig, inseparable from the compassion of all the Buddhas. And whereas phenomena lack the qualities that make it a true source of refuge, because it's always changing, because it falls apart, because it will always let us down, Chenrezig's nature will never let us down. And a fully enlightened being like Chenrezig has actualized primordial wisdom. His mind is the non-dual, unchanging, enlightened mind of all Buddhas. And because of that, we can take refuge in him, continually bowing to him with our body, speech, and mind. All right, let's read one more stanza and then talk about that one. So, second stanza, we can all read it together. The perfect Buddhas, sources of benefit and happiness, arise from practicing the genuine Dharma. Since that, in turn, depends on knowing how to practice, the practices of a bodhisattva shall be explained. A truly good, altruistic mind, motivated by the firm commitment to accomplish the enlightened mind, wisdom and compassion, for the benefit of all beings, is the source of both temporary and ultimate happiness. Happiness and well-being are the result of positive deeds, and the Dharma, as taught by the Buddhas, shows us which deeds are positive and which are not. Therefore, if we practice these instructions, we will achieve happiness and be able to benefit others. His Holiness Karmapa, on his commentary on this section, says something very, very interesting, and I thought I would pass it along to you. He says that sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that all of our happiness depends directly on the Buddhas or the Lama. They regard these teachers as all-powerful while thinking that they themselves can do very little or even nothing at all. Praying to others, they say, "Please make me happy. Make everything well." However, to believe that the Buddhas are omnipotent and to depend on them as if our happiness can be willed by them is not the way. The Buddhas do not have the power to give us happiness. After all, if they did have such power, there would be no problems in the world, would there? But in fact, our happiness depends on us. We have to create it. No one else can give it to us. So we need to know how to engender our own happiness deep within. And this is what the Buddhas teach. And so when we say that the perfect Buddhas are sources of benefit and happiness, it's because they teach us. Now we also talk about how they can give blessings to those who practice and who connect with the Buddhas and things like that. It's not that we don't have them to help us and to guide us. We do. But I found that section really interesting because in a lot of monotheism and in the monotheistic type culture that we're raised in, a lot of people struggle with what's often called the problem of evil, right? If God is a perfectly all-powerful being, why does evil exist in the world? And I think His Holiness Karmapa here is saying that that the Buddhas shouldn't be thought of that way as someone who can just make everything okay, because if they could, they would have. but that they help us and guide us to find happiness through developing our compassion and wisdom. So now we can get into the actual verses of the text where Togme Zangpo shows us how to practice this Dharma. All right, so let's read number 1. Now that you have obtained the precious human body, the great boat so difficult to find, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of samsara, to listen, reflect, and meditate with diligence day and night is the practice of a bodhisattva. Because you are in this room or watching or listening to this teaching, there are several things we can conclude about you. We can conclude that you have not been born in one of the 8 states in which there is no freedom to practice the Dharma. Instead, you have been born with the 8 freedoms. These freedoms are free from being born in a hell realm, free from being born into the preta or hungry ghost realm, free from being born into the animal realm, free from being born a barbarian, free from being born as a long-lived God, free from being born with wrong views, free from being born in a time without enlightened beings, and free from being born with impaired faculties that prevent you from being able to receive and understand the Dharma teachings. In addition, you have the 10 endowments. And the first 5 are about the individual, and the second 5 are about circumstances outside of yourself. You've been born as a human being. You've been born in a place where the Dharma is taught. You have the capacity to understand when the Dharma is taught. You don't have a lifestyle that is in conflict with the Dharma, and you have faith in the teachings. And the last 5, a Buddha has appeared in this world. He has taught the Dharma. The Dharma has remained and still exists in your time. You have entered the Dharma, and you have access to a spiritual teacher. Having all these causes and conditions is exceedingly rare. You don't just have a human rebirth, you have a precious human rebirth. Now, being born as a human, according to Buddhist teaching, is itself exceedingly rare. Animals and insects outnumber us by many times, right? And then there are other realms as well, according to Buddhist cosmology. So being born a human itself is very rare, but not only that, you've been born at a time and place and with circumstances where you can hear and receive the Dharma. And because you are here and seeking Dharma, there's some sort of faith that you have there, that the Dharma brings you truth that can help you. And because then we have this precious opportunity and we have this little bit of faith, then we can develop that into the diligence and joyful effort with which to practice the Dharma. Now, the teachers say that we have not obtained this precious human existence by chance. It is the result of having heard the Buddha's name in a past life, having taken refuge in him, accumulated virtuous actions, and developed some wisdom. There is no certainty that we will have this vessel again. If you fail to practice the Dharma in this life, it is certain that you will not obtain a human existence in the next life. To neglect such an opportunity, therefore, would be very foolish. Do not waste it. Practice day and night. Those aren't my words. Those are from Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who wrote commentary on the 37 practices called, I think it's called The Heart of Compassion. But I have the Kindle version of that, so I have nothing to hold up, sorry. We contemplate how rare our causes and conditions are as motivation to take advantage of the time we have. And teachers are very blunt about this, Tibetan teachers. One teacher says, "He who in autumn does not provide for the coming winter is considered a fool. The Dharma alone will help us when we die, and we know that death is certain. So not to practice it now is utterly foolish." Because, as they say, the Dharma is the only thing that will help us at the time of our death. Having a precious human body is like having a well-rigged ship on which to sail across the ocean to an island of treasures. And that is what is meant by the great boat, so difficult to find. And yet everyone in this room has it. Therefore, don't waste this incredibly rare opportunity. Instead, use it to free yourself and others from suffering. Our motivation is to carry all sentient beings across the ocean of suffering to freedom. Thus, we promise that day and night, without laziness or distraction, we will listen, reflect, and meditate on the genuine Dharma. First, we listen. Then we use our intelligence to analyze what we have heard. We reflect. And finally, we meditate upon what we have heard and analyzed. And that is how a bodhisattva practices. And I really love the pattern of this entire text, because each one of these end that way. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. All right, 1 down, 36 to go. Let's go ahead and read number 2. By the way, this is supposed to be a series of talks. I will be happy if we make it through number 3 today. So we'll keep going with this text. All right, number 2. Passion towards friends churns like water. Hatred towards enemies burns like fire. Through dark ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to reject. To abandon one's homeland is the practice of a bodhisattva. This verse is very challenging. I don't want anyone to leave here and make a major life decision to move far away just on the basis of this verse. That's not what we're trying to say here. One way of looking at this verse is to think of leaving your native land as leaving behind all the habits that cause the 3 poisons. And what are the 3 poisons? The first 3 lines of this verse: attachment, which is called passion here, hatred, and ignorance. Those first 3 lines are talking about the 3 poisons, and often they are mentioned as friends, enemies, and strangers, right? We get very attached to our friends, we are very averse to our enemies, and we're very apathetic toward strangers and toward people we don't know. So that's what it's talking about here. The main thrust of this verse is that we should leave behind the 3 poisons. Now, it is, of course, true that the closer we are to a person or situation, the stronger our emotions are. Our closest relationships often give rise to the most difficult emotions. All those jokes about arguments and fights at Thanksgiving, they don't come from nowhere, right? That's our closest, the people closest to us can hurt us the most. We can hurt them the most. That's where you get the most complexity of emotion. And think about politics. Does anyone here struggle with negative emotions regarding American politics? Now imagine that you're suddenly dropped into a living room in, let's pick on a country, let's say Iceland, right? And the evening news is on and they're discussing an upcoming election. Let's just pretend we can understand what they're saying. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't name a single politician from Iceland. I don't know their political parties. I don't know the major issues that they disagree on. And so I would have absolutely no emotional response to seeing a poll showing one Icelandic politician leading another. And so now, if I lived there a while and it became my new homeland, I might become very emotionally invested in the politics. But right at first, I would not be. The point is that those closest to us and the issues facing our homelands are much more likely to stir in us difficult emotions that can distract us from our bodhisattva motivation. So remember, purity of heart is to will one thing. Now, politics can definitely cause suffering, and it can definitely relieve suffering. And to that extent, it is important. But it isn't the root of suffering. It isn't the root cause, and it can't end suffering, right? There is something deeper. At the root of it is our ego clinging. And if you look deeper in politics, it really is just people expressing that very thing, that selfishness. It's not practical for me to move to Iceland anytime soon. And with our connected world the way it is, I'm not sure it would do any good. I would still be able to keep track of the same politics I keep track of here. The information age has in some ways redefined what is our homeland. You might exist in a completely different sphere of information and ideas than your next door neighbor. But if you choose to be, you are always connected to your sources of information wherever you go. But try to recognize those things that cause in you attachment, anger, or hatred, and the ignorance that pervades both of those. Find a way to practice renunciation as much as possible to remove from your life the conditions that give rise to these three poisons. Going back to verse 1, we have a precious human life, and we must make use of it. We must not allow our practice to be hijacked. And that brings us to verse 3, and we'll go through it quickly. And then I have one more story, and then we'll move along. All right. Give me a second. I lost verse 3. All right. Giving up negative places, mental afflictions gradually decrease. With no distractions, virtuous activities naturally increase. When mind becomes clear, certainty in the Dharma is born. To rely on solitude is the practice of a bodhisattva. This is a further instruction to practice renunciation of everything that causes distractions. And this verse kind of takes it to a different angle on it. So verse 2 implores us to leave behind those things which cause attachment and aversion to arise, which cause those difficult emotions. And verse 3 is more about letting go of worldly concerns and those things which can become obstacles to our practice just because we get caught up in so much. It's about renunciation, but it's about renunciation for the purposes of kind of clearing the decks and giving us the ability to practice. Solitude gives us the opportunity to turn our minds inward, to identify our defects, rid ourselves of them, and develop our inherent good qualities. Now, this is a very difficult teaching for me right now. I have, a wife, 3 kids, pets. I'm a householder. People depend on me. It would be very selfish of me, honestly, to leave my responsibilities and go on an extended meditation retreat or wander the countryside like a yogi. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things I can give up. That doesn't mean that I don't have things that are optional in my life that distract me from practice. And Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche reminds us that whatever meditation or reflection we have done, it will never be wasted. The benefit it brings will be present at the time of our deaths, and it will help us to be born in circumstances to continue our practice. So he says, even if we only practice for a small amount each day with faith and inspiration, good qualities will steadily increase, and regular practice makes it easy to transform our minds. Now I'm going to sum up this section with a story from His Holiness Karmapa. And it's a story from the Kadampas, the group that I think Atisha started it. It's a story about a young man, and this young man didn't know how to practice. So he starts out by circumambulating a stupa. Not looking here and there, he very diligently walks around this stupa many times. And he did this earnestly for a long time. And eventually, a great Kadampa master came by and saw him and asked, "What are you doing here?" And the man said, "I'm practicing Dharma. I'm circumambulating the stupa." The Kadampa master replied, "You are circumambulating. That is very good. But wouldn't it be better to do genuine Dharma practice?" The Kadampa master then went away, leaving the young man perplexed. He said to himself, "I thought I was practicing Dharma, but maybe this is not it. What then is Dharma practice?" He decided that reading scriptures must be the way. He went to the library, took out some books, and began reading. He was reading with great dedication and reciting the scriptures when he met the Kadampa master again. Once more, the master asked, "What are you doing?" The practitioner said, "I'm reading scriptures and practicing the Dharma." The master replied, "That's very good, but wouldn't it be better for you to engage in genuine Dharma practice?" Now the young man was quite confused, and he did not know what to do. So he thought about it and finally exclaimed, "That's it, meditation. It's nothing more than that." So he went to a quiet corner and sat with his legs crossed, closed his eyes, and meditated, thinking that he was doing great practice. But again, the Kadampa master appeared and said, "What are you doing here?" "I'm practicing Dharma and meditating." The master said, "It is very good to do some meditation, but wouldn't it be better if you really practiced the Dharma free from error?" Now the practitioner was totally confounded and asked, "What is real Dharma practice then? It's not circumambulating the stupa, it's not reading the scriptures, it's not meditating. What is it?" The Kadampa master replied, "Cut through your attachment. That is the practice of Dharma." Now these other things, of course, help us with that, but they are not the goal, right? The goal is to cut through our ego clinging and our attachment, and to develop our wisdom and compassion. All right. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but we're in part 1 of this text. And part 1 contains the preparation practices, and we'll get on to part 2 another time. Motivating ourselves to practice by recognizing how rare and precious our circumstances are right now, and then removing everything that causes the 3 poisons to arise and distracts us from practice is the first part of this preparation. And I'll close with a verse from Shantideva. He says, all the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. We are learning the practices of a bodhisattva to help remove the misery from the world and to fill it with joy. Thank you for being patient and attentive. We have some time for questions. 2 microphones, one on either side of the room, if anyone wants to come up and ask a question. And I'll do my best to answer. Hello, welcome, thank you.
All right, so I just want to know if I'm wrong for this.
What's that?
Well, I just want to know if I'm wrong. What
Okay.
I'm about to say. I didn't do anything. So I have a negative sister, and you can see it in her life. Things fall apart, and not too long ago she asked for money, and this has been a long thing for years, and I don't mind helping her, but it's kind of like. It never ends, you know what I mean? So I was just thinking when I was downstairs, would I be wrong if, based on Buddha's, teaching, if I was to use that to lead her to more enlightenment, to positivity? Like, say if she wants to borrow some money, I say, okay, you can do it. I'll give you the money, but come to the class with me. You know what I mean? So I was wondering if that would be wrong of me.
I don't think so. Let me tell you the thoughts that come to mind while you're talking about that, first of all. Our teachers have talked about, they call it idiot compassion. They say, we don't have to practice idiot compassion. Basically, idiot compassion is allowing yourself to be taken advantage of kind of thing. You know what I mean? Compassion is about motivation. And if your motivation is to help your sister, sometimes the more wise way to do that is to withhold from her if you think on a longer term that's going to help with meet her needs, that tough love kind of thing. Now, as far as using that as leverage to bring her to teachings, I don't know. That's a really tough question.
Yeah.
We don't, generally speaking, we are not an evangelical group, right? We don't try to pull people in no matter what kind of thing. We're kind of a we'll be here with the teachings and people find us, and we'd love to let people know we're here. That's fine, but we don't bring, we don't strong arm, I'd say.
Right.
But what I see in you is the obvious motivation and care and concern to help your sister on a longer term, right? Help, if I just give you money again, we're just gonna keep this cycle going kind of thing. But if I can do something to help you find some grounding and to free yourself from some of the patterns that are and habits that are causing this cycle, then, maybe that will help more. Right, so I think I can see that you have that motivation for your sister. But I don't know, that's a tough one.
So, like, if I was to give her the money, that would be attachment, basically, right? Because she only coming because of that.
Yeah.
So probably just ever come.
It's a complicated, I think it's a very complicated situation. Because if you don't want to give her the money because you don't want to be generous and you want to hold on to everything you have and stuff like that. That's your attachment. But if you do give her the money and she's just asking money because she knows she can get it from you anytime and things like that, then in some ways, you know, she's developing negative habits and patterns and karma by taking advantage of that and by her attachments and by her own selfishness and clinging. But as far as what the wisest way out of it is, I don't know. I would say the most important thing for you is to really examine your motivations.
Right.
And if your motivations aren't fully compassion for her, then kind of check that, right?
Right.
If some of your motivations are selfish, and again, this is someone really close to you. This is where our emotions and things
Right.
like that can be so complicated. But I would focus on your motivations and find out what your motivations are and be very clear if you choose to give her money, if you choose to make strings attached to that money where she has to get some kind of help or something like that. I would say if your motivations are right, you know, then that's going to go a long ways to helping the situation. So that's the best advice I can give.
Thank you. That helps. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, all right, we got more. Bunch of them. 3.
Thank you
David,
very
how are you?
much. This is great. Hope I remember. I always feel bad when I'm driving at the entrance to the freeway and there's a person who's basically begging. And gee, maybe they're Buddhist. So Eric, another teacher, suggested that instead of giving them money, you give them something like food, a Powerball bar or something. And that may help you if she needs money for food, or if she just wants money, then you can, you know, give her food.
Thank you.
And I like that because I'm very simple.
Ron, how are you?
Hey, Marcus. Getting back to the text, I've read the 37 Practices many times over the years. And the second verse, I think there's an underlying message of impermanence. Like the 3 poisons, I like to think of them as the 3 kleshas. They're all impermanent in the long run. And even to abandon one's homeland. I mean, I'm going to California next month, only for 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. But when I do that, I'll feel the first half of the trip, I'll probably feel like I'm abandoning Columbus, but I'll be back. So that's just what I get out of it.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. All the distinctions we make of this is a friend, this is an enemy, this is a stranger, that all changes. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends, strangers become friends or enemies. That's all impermanent. And so our emotions around that are constantly in flux. They change with our thoughts, and our thoughts are constantly coming and going. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's an impermanent thing. Thank you.
Hey there.
Hello.
Just a quick clarification because I missed it. You said regular practice makes it easy to blank our minds. What was I missed that one word.
Let me get my computer on again here. I said to transform our minds.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, regular practice gives us that suppleness and that fluidity in our minds, so that it makes it easier to change. All right, thank you all for listening. Let's actually, I'm going to do something a little different. We usually use the laminated sheet for our dedication, but instead, let's do the dedication from this text, which is the very last stanza. And let's dedicate the merit to all beings. And by the way, if you guys want to keep this sheet, you're welcome to. I can print more for the next time. If you want to leave it behind, you can leave it behind. Totally up to you. So let's say together the last stanza. By virtue of the merit gathered here, by the power of relative and ultimate bodhichitta, may all sentient beings become like the protector Chinrezi, who dwells neither in the extreme of existence nor in that of peace. Thank you all.